Okay, we should have the four people that should still be able to hear me. Of course, is Roland. Roland, you're there, right?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, Veronica, you're there, right?
Yes.
And Julius, you are here, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so this is our panel, Roland. I'll give each of them a formal introduction, but let me start by welcoming everybody to the call, and thank you for taking time out of your busy life, all of you. We have about 1,000 lines that we have reserved for this call, and they were flooding in as Roland entered on the call. So,
George, can you speak a little louder or more directly into the mic for the recording? Thank you.
Okay. All right. And I want you to let me know when if I'm speaking too low. So I'll speak up a little bit more.
Right into
the
better? Mic. Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. And what we're going to do is we're going to record this call, and then for those who could not get in, and others who were not able to make the call because of other obligations, we will forward this out to our network of networks, which is about 200,000 people, and they have networks. So a lot of people are going to end up hearing this call by the end of the week, I suspect. Let me first do a little formal introduction about who FraserNet is. We are a 25-year-old organization, business actually. So we're engaged in social entrepreneurship, and we focus on economic development through education, training, and empowerment for black people. There are 51,000 top black professionals, business owners, and community leaders in our network, and we are connected to and engaged actively with 24 other networks as well. We have two very specific goals that we have been working on for a quarter of a century. Most of you who are on the call tonight participate in our conference and go to our Facebook page and tweet with us and engage in our workshops and seminars around the country. And you know what those two goals are. Number one is to help black people build wealth that can be transferred intergenerationally. That's the number one goal. And the number two goal is to help black people become the number one employer of black people in the 21st century. We are politically active in a sense that we believe that we have to be engaged in politics because it is a huge determinant of who wins and who loses in a democratic capitalistic system. And so what we wanted to do tonight, right a week or so before the election, is engage one of the brightest minds, one of the most fearless leaders, one of really a sort of a political genius with incredible savvy. Not only is he one of the great commentators and pundits on mainstream television today, but he is also a great speaker and a leader in his own right, and that is none other. And, of course, he needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him a short introduction, and that is Roland Sebastian.
And George, a little more loudly. Just a little more loudly, please. Thank you.
All right. That is Roland Martin. We're talking with Roland Martin tonight. And Roland is an American journalist and a syndicated columnist, and he's with the Creators Syndicate, and he's the author of Speak, Brother, A Black Man's View of America. He's the author of Listening to the Spirit Within, 50 Perspectives on Faith, and the first president, Barack Obama's road to the White House, as originally reported by Roland Martin. He's also a commentator on TV One and the host of Washington Watch with Roland Martin, a 1-hour Sunday morning news show on that network. And he is also, as I said earlier, a CNN contributor on a variety of other shows, network shows and cable shows on TV land. So again, Roland, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy life to be with us.
All right, glad to be here.
We deeply appreciate that. We really, really do. I've put together a small panel, Roland. Aside from myself, I brought to the table a young lion. I don't know if you know Julius Cartwright up close and personal, but he is an award-winning entrepreneur out of Cleveland, Ohio, has an extremely successful business in the real estate and financial markets, but just as importantly, if not more importantly, he was recently installed as the president of the National Association of Real Estate Broker, the 27th president, and he is, of course, in charge of the 64th annual National Convention for the National Association of Real Estate Brokers coming up next year. I'm sorry, no, it was this year in New Orleans. So Roland is with us, and Julius, you are with us, and Veronica Conway, who is sort of navigating and managing the call and will be participating in the dialogue with you. And Veronica Conway is, I think, one of America's great secrets. She is one of the top black coaches in America. She is FraserNet's executive coach for our Power Networking conferences. She is the founder of the National Association of Black Coaches, a brilliant sister out of but San Francisco, California. So she is on the call with us and helping to manage the call and the process of the call. And so both Julius and Veronica and myself will be asking you questions. So that's the team. The way this will work, for those of you that are on the call and you would like to ask questions of Roland, we can't open the lines because it's just too much noise when you open a line to ask someone a question in these kinds of calls where there are lots of people. So I'm going to ask you that while Roland is talking, that you email me your questions. I'm right in front of my computer as we speak. Email me at gfraser@frasernet.com. That's gfraser@frasernet.com. And so your question will pop up on my screen, and then I will then relay the question to our distinguished guest, Roland Martin. So that's how it will work. As you know, we are recording the call for distribution later this week to a variety of people who couldn't make the call. So let me start with the first question, Roland, and then I ask my co-panelists to jump in whenever you deem appropriate, whenever you feel comfortable. As I said about you, Roland, one of the things I love about you, I've been knowing you a long, long time, not only do you have a special genius around politics, but I think more powerfully, even than your genius and your savvy, is your fearlessness, not only in your comments and your punditry, but even when you speak. I was at a speech that you gave not long ago, sitting right down front, and probably one of the best speeches I've heard given by a black leader, and I put that in quotes, in a long, long time. I just love your fearlessness. I love your, in a sense, confidence to just say it how you feel it, say it how you know it, and say it how you believe it. So I expect that we will hear the same kind of thing this evening. So let me start with my question, and it's this, and it's a question I'm sure that you have heard. It's a question that the Republicans are asking black and brown people, and that is, are black folks better off now in terms of unemployment, median income, et cetera, than they were 4 years ago? Are black folks better off now than they were 4 years ago?
Anybody can look at the stats and conclude that obviously black unemployment is high. You look at the median income that has dropped. 53% of black wealth has been wiped out as a result of the home foreclosure crisis in this country. And so we've always known the phrase, when America catches a cold, black America catches pneumonia. And so, frankly, America has had pneumonia for the last 3 or 4 years, and black America has had a terminal illness. And so we understand. So we certainly understand that. But I think it is too simplistic of a statement when I hear Republicans make that case, because what they also don't want to confront is what were the policies that put the country in the situation that we are in right now. So, for instance, if you talk about why did Wall Street go haywire with all of the different things that it was doing, it was because Glass-Steagall was repealed. We allowed these banks to get larger and larger. We allowed them to amass so much control that they frankly could do whatever they wanted to do. They got in trouble, so therefore we had to bail them out. Then I think you begin to talk about the various housing policies. I remember interviewing Secretary of HUD Alphonso Jackson when he talked about that the federal regulations over housing were repealed by Republicans, and he said that was a mistake because it led to 50 different states having different rulings that opened up the door for the kind of mortgage fraud, for the kind of subprime loans, for the kind of things that we saw take place across this country. And I think black folks also are asking a much different question, and that is, beyond just the unemployment stats and the housing stats, black folks are also saying that when you look at where the country is going, what are the policies being advocated? And so black folks are being a lot more, they can look at it and say, President Obama has been in office. They can say, you look at what's happening with Affordable Care Act. You look at the health crisis affecting black people. The Affordable Care Act directly impacts that. You talk about also student loans, what is happening, from $60 billion now being freed up, money not going to the bank, who operate essentially as pass-through organizations. And so I think when people assess where black America is, it's a lot deeper than simply what an unemployment stat is and what a median income is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Roland, you said that blacks are not applying enough political pressure, that there is and I quote you, a negation of black influence because of black leader allegiance, and end of quote. So in your view,
yes,
what is the black agenda? What would be the most important elements of an agenda for us to advocate for?
Well, before I get to the specific agenda, let me address what I mean by that. Black folks have always had an inside-outside game, and that is we've always had people who were at the table with power, but we've always had folks who were outside the building who were also applying that public pressure. You have to have the internal forces and the external forces operating at the same time in order for you to achieve something. And I think, obviously, by having a black president, African Americans are extremely sensitive to that. They want to see President Barack Obama succeed. And there has been this fear that we really can't say anything, can't ask for anything, because the president has so many other people sniping at him. And so I've heard people say he has a full plate. We don't want to add anything to it. I've said that makes no sense to me, because even with a black president or a black governor or a black mayor, there's still a return on the investment when you go out and vote. And so if everybody else has an agenda, and in fact, look, the Human Rights Campaign, they presented the president with a 51-page agenda when he came into office, 51 pages. Gays and lesbians have been very supportive of the president, but have also made it perfectly clear we still have some expectations and want you to deliver. Hispanics, the exact same thing. You begin to talk about women. You begin to talk about different interest groups. African Americans are just as influential as all of those groups. In fact, no other group provides the Democratic Party or this president the percentage of votes that are provided on a 4-year basis. So I believe you should never abdicate your agenda based upon who is sitting in the Oval Office, because your agenda should never change. Now, of course, people will say, well, this is different. They will see the table. Yes, but you still have to make sure that your voice is outside of putting the kind of pressure on to let folks on the inside know we have to get this thing done, or they're going to get a little bit more antsy out there. Now, the NAACP and others, one of the things that they have called for that has not happened has been a national moratorium on home foreclosures. That has not taken place. That is something that is critically important, because when you look at what's happening is that essentially people are still stuck with these crazy loans that frankly need to be drawn down, principals drawn down, the mortgage coming down, to allow people to literally be able to afford to stay in these homes. That, again, 53% of black wealth, in excess of $200 billion, has been lost. Elizabeth Warren was on my TV One show 2 years ago. She said it will be at least 1 or 2 generations before black America recoups that. Not add black wealth, recoups what we've lost the last 3 years. I believe that is a fundamental issue. The second thing I would say for a black agenda, and that is I believe the president and the Congress should get behind what has been called the Clyburn Amendment. What the Clyburn Amendment calls for is for that any federal program, it's very similar to the Powell Amendment in the 60s. The Clyburn Amendment says that if you have areas that, first of all, that 10% of federal grant dollars will go to places where the poverty rate has been 20% for at least 30 years. Now, here's what's interesting about this here. There are 474 counties in America where 20% more of the population has lived below the poverty line for at least 30 years. Guess what? 2/3 of those counties are Republican. So this is not a black plan, a Democrat plan. This kind of plan targets the resources to the areas most in need. Congressman Clyburn told me he had pitched it to the president, to all the cabinet secretaries, to try to get this expanded. It was used in a small way in the stimulus bill, but this is a way for you to take federal dollars to directly impact those most in need. I believe this is something that black leadership should be advocating for and should be the standard for all federal dollars spent, and whether they were in the congressional budget or how the federal departments also spend their dollars. And so, again, 2/3 of the counties are in Republican districts, would also impact African Americans, Hispanics as well, those who are most impoverished.
So, Roland, this is Veronica. And so do you think that the president should be focused on the most vulnerable in the black community, or focusing, let's say, on the shrinking black middle class, or on top black leadership? Where do you think that the president can get the most traction?
Well, first of all, black leadership should be pressing on both, because, look, bottom line is you need to maintain existing black middle class, but you also want folks who are below the poverty line to go above that and then move to that next level. And so, to me, it's not an either or; it's and. And so, by publicly backing this kind of initiative, to me, really help folks out and understand what I'm talking about here. The kind of programs we're talking about: water treatment systems. We're talking about technical colleges. We're talking about different types of programs. Congressman Clyburn told me that there was a place in South Carolina in his state. They had been trying to get a particular water treatment system for like 30 or 40 years. And it wasn't until this program was put in place they were able to do so. Now, people might say, well, I mean, Roland, come on, water treatment center. You're talking about a difference between a healthy living, between living conditions, all those different things along those lines for communities that are impoverished. This is one of those initiatives. And again, the beauty of this amendment is nobody can say, oh, this is really helping just black folks. No. 2/3 of Republican districts is helping those who are impoverished across the board, but they certainly can help African Americans.
Roland, there's a question that just popped up. Eugene Austin asked this question. Interesting question. He said interest groups that Roland mentioned have lobbyists. And who are the lobbyists for the African American agenda? That's a question.
Well,
NAACP, some other groups. Who are our lobbyists?
First of all, you have a number of groups that are there. Obviously, you have the NAACP. Hillary Shelton is head of the NAACP's Washington Bureau. That is the direct liaison, frankly, on many of these issues. Then, of course, you have Rainbow Push. You have the Leadership Conference of Civil Rights with Wade Henderson. You have Melanie Campbell with the Black Women's Roundtable. You have the National Congress of Negro Women. But you even also have, look, when it comes to black women, your sorority. Keep in mind, when you talk about, again, things that you are desiring, the president appointed 2 women to the Supreme Court. An African-American woman wasn't even interviewed. Black women voted at a higher rate than any other group in America in 2008. And I've spoken to Deltas, to AKAs. I've spoken to any number of black female groups, and I've said, I'm sorry, your voices can't be silent when this happens, because I believe it is extremely important for black women to see the First Lady. But if the president is reelected, she's only going to be there the next 4 years. Right. You appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court, she's going to be there the next 30 years.
Right.
So, again, it's thinking a lot more broader. That touches on public policy. One of the other issues that I think when you talk about so-called lobbying, you have groups who do these things. You have a number of organizations out there. But what is needed, what is really, of course, you have National Urban League as well, but really what is needed is, I believe, a true scorecard. And I see the Urban League's annual State of Black America report. But I'm not talking about a report card. I'm talking about how are we advancing. I interviewed Reverend Sharpton for Ebony Magazine for the Power issue in 2009. And he said in that issue that we should be able to look at black America at the end of the president's first term, if he's elected for a second term, the end of his second term, and be able to assess how did black America do during his 8 years. And he said we should see some gains. So we should be tracking this data. So if we're talking about black high school dropout, what was it last year? What are the initiatives being put forth in the next 364 days? And a year from now, how in terms of what happened. We talk about the reading rates, the math rates as well. I believe I'm tired of black America sort of having these discussions where we lay out multiple issues and things along those lines. I want to see what are the achievables, what's the accountability. I don't want to just talk about let's have more black businesses. I want to see more black businesses with scale. And so we should be measuring that in 3, 6, 9 month increments so we understand where we're going. And so I think these type of things is important that we're advocating for. And it's also important for the rest of us to be pushing these organizations saying, if you're getting invited to the White House, if you're sitting down with Congress, if you're sitting down with big business, we want to know what's the result of the conversation. I don't care about a table at your gala. What are the results of the initiatives you're putting forward?
Right. What organization, which lobbyist group, that's great. What lobbyist group, for example, should take on the responsibility of keeping score? There are many white lobbyist groups that keep score. I mean, they actually keep score, just as you're saying.
First of all,
they can quote statistics from year to year.
Right. The NAACP has a scorecard based upon this is their agenda, this is how members of Congress voted, this is how what was passed, what did they get, what they didn't get. They have it on their website. They have the actual report card. They also have the questionnaire sent to both presidential candidates, and so that's what they have. Now, here's what I think is the most important thing. We need black organizations to stay the hell in their lane. Okay?
Mm-hmm. I've heard you speak on that.
We should not, and this is no disrespect to any civil rights organization, but we cannot be having a discussion about building black businesses with civil rights organizations if we're not talking to black business groups, and that's what they do. I'm sorry. If I'm not trying to have a conversation with a civil rights group about trying to create the scale for black businesses, I should be talking to the Black Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
Okay? And I think what happens is we have too many organizations that, frankly, are traveling down a highway, driving in 2 and 3 different lanes, and all we end up with are these car wrecks because folks are operating outside of their lane. And so if you are an organization that's dealing with education, that is your expertise. We look to you for that. Okay, Marian Wright Edelman, that's the Children's Defense Fund. They are specifically lobbying on behalf of children. and specifically black children. Got it. We got who you are. When you're talking about National Congress of Negro Women, you're talking about black sororities, Black Women's Roundtable. They are looking at issues strictly from the perspective of black women. Gotcha. Stay in your lane. I think we need to have, again, a lot more, if you will, discipline.
Right.
And ensuring that when we're having specific conversations, we are talking to the right people. I just don't want to have everybody talking about everything and trying to have their hand in entertainment, sports, business, you name it, because then you have no focus.
Right. Julius, you started a question, Julius?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Martin. Those comments have been outstanding. I'm going to go on record and just say that Ohio is going to deliver Obama despite voter suppression, and he's going to be reelected. My question is this: what should Obama do to improve the state of housing in black America during his second term? And what can we do to assist as a real estate trade association?
I think first what really jumps out is you have had 3 or 4 housing programs that have come out of the administration that they have not been, frankly, strong. They've sort of struggled in that area. It's no surprise housing has not come up a lot during any of the debates. Mitt Romney, frankly, and look, this is just fact. When I was doing a story, when I was writing a column on the economic policies of Mitt Romney, I went to his website, and for the longest, there was no discussion of housing whatsoever. Even 3 weeks after he gave his convention speech, their housing wasn't even mentioned on the site, and I kept trashing them on the air. And 3 weeks later, all of a sudden, boom, a housing plan appeared because I was giving them hell for it. And so he really doesn't have a real housing plan. I believe that there needs to be massive adjustments made to the existing housing plans. And I've had Secretary Sean Donovan on my TV One show, and every time he came back, I said, Secretary, you're back with another housing plan. Hey, man, I need to know this thing is working because I said it's sounding to me like it's the same housing plan. And so I think we should be saying of the existing plans, in terms of the HAMP program, is that really working for us? Is that successful for us? That has to be an aggressive tack that we must take. And again, we must be pushing for significant changes to the plans, to push principles down, to basically right some of the wrongs we saw in the housing crisis. And that must take place. I've talked to Ben Jealous about this, the NAACP. They have been pushing for this as well. I think that they certainly are an entity that should be a major issue. Also, Gary Flowers of the Black Leadership Forum, they've also been pushing that as well. And again, I think that should be something we get behind because understand, most Americans, their wealth comes from home ownership. Mm-hmm. That's where it comes from. For African Americans especially, that's really where our wealth comes from. And let me make this last point before we go to the next question. Black women, they are the fastest group in the country in terms of starting small businesses. What's happening is a lot of these sisters own their homes. They then go to the bank. They then go to the SBA. So because they have their home, they frankly have collateral.
Right.
Well, if you don't have a home, you can't get a loan. No home, no loan, no business. I mean, it's real clear. Mm-hmm. You don't have the ability to even take out a home equity loan to pay for a kid's education. And so I think housing should be – I get everything else. I get people talking about jobs, and health, education. But if you do not have stable home ownership, then your communities of color then transition from home-owning communities to rental communities. And I can show you the stats are clear. When you have rental communities, then you have transient populations. You do not have stable communities. You're going to have crime go up. You're going to have folks who take care of homes, don't take care of homes. And it's the most important thing. Businesses do not relocate or open businesses largely in areas where you have transient population. Stable businesses want stable communities. That's why you don't see a grocery store or a Home Depot come near an area until they reach a certain level of capacity with homes in that area. Black communities must have the exact same thing. I think the top thing for African Americans, if the president's reelected or even if Mitt Romney is elected, there has to be an aggressive plan to deal with home ownership and the foreclosure crisis in the black community.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question from Timothy Butler. This is an interesting. He said, first, for the record, I'm an Obama supporter. However, I think that the administration did not have targeted legislation for the black community. The women, immigrant groups, and homosexual groups were not quiet, and they got equal pay, immigration support, and the support of same-sex marriages. We need to speak up on our behalf. In the second term, Roland, do you think the administration will have targeted legislation for the black community and more diversity in his administration? That's question number one. And number two, will either candidate support legislation restoring voting rights for felons legislations which disproportionately affect black men? No vote, no power. Timothy Butler, great questions.
Timothy, the first thing is you're not going to see targeted legislation unless you see the ground support driving that and exactly what is it. I mean, you're simply not. You haven't seen it for the last 4 years. I don't think you're actually going to see that. Again, I mean, you heard the president say, you heard it come from the White House, he's not the president of Black America, he's the president for all America. But I do believe you can have, and see again, I deal with the question in a different way. I believe you need to have targeted programs for the people most in need. Now, if we want to do roll call, if you say who's most in need when it comes to jobs, black folks top of the list. Who's most in need when it comes to most impacted by home foreclosure, black folks at the top of the list. Who's most in need when it comes to health crisis in America, black folks at the top of the list. So I don't even need to say black. All I got to say is target it to the folks who are most in need. We know exactly what they look like. So it's understanding the reality of how do you get legislation passed, and if you say target those most in need, it's real clear who's most in need. Who has the highest unemployment rate when it comes to young folks? Black folks do, black teens. So I think that's how you do it. But then you also have to then have the willpower to drive that through. And what I mean by that is you've got to have folks organized and mobilized. Black folks have come to me for the last 3 years, mad as hell about the Tea Party. Now, let me tell you something. I said, first of all, the Tea Party have the constitutionally protected right to do exactly what they did. Freedom to assembly, freedom of the press, freedom of speech. I said, you mad because they organized and mobilized? What they did was no different than what black folks did during the Civil Rights Movement. I said, so while you're mad about them, what you should be saying is, how do we mobilize and organize? That's the real issue. People need to understand listening on this phone call. What takes place next Tuesday is the end of one process, but it is the beginning of another. The new Congress is going to convene in January 2013. Black folks cannot wait until March of 2013 to say, hey, what are we going to ask Congress for? Every other interest group right now, they are waiting to see how the Congress looks, how the House looks, how the Senate looks, how many seats do the Dems have, do the Republicans have in both chambers, and they will be spending the time between November 7th and the swearing in of the new Congress working on their agenda. That's where we have to be. And that means using social media, making phone calls, using urban radio. I mean, let me lay it out for black folks so they can understand this. Now I'm going to answer the second part of his question. Tom Joyner, 8 million listeners. Steve Harvey, 7 million listeners. Michael Bajan, I think 3 million listeners. Ricky Smiley, same thing. And you have Russ Parr Show. You got Doug Banks Show. You got Yolanda Adams Show. You got Warren Valentine Show. You got Reverend Sharpton Show. You have about 8 to 10 You have Cocoa Brother as well. You have 8 to 10 nationally syndicated black radio shows. 50% of black America gets their information from black radio. That's R&B is the number one format among black radio listeners 12 plus. My point is we have infrastructure where we can actually drive our agenda, but we have to be organized in using it. The second part of his question, George, was
let me go back to it because it was a great question. I'll give it to you. He said, "Will either candidate support legislation restoring voting rights for felons legislation, which disproportionately affect black men?"
Understand, folks, voting. We do not have a national voting system. We have national elections that are determined by 50 states. So restoring voting rights for felons is largely a state issue. Remember, Governor Jeb Bush restored voting rights for felons. Governor Rick Scott rescinds that and takes them away. So what should be happening is we should be having organized efforts to change the laws in these states. That way it's not an executive order from a governor that can be rescinded or added, that if it's the law, it's in place. And I think what needs to happen is this is where we begin to partner with whites, with Hispanics, to broaden this issue to say this isn't restoring voting rights to felons is not a black issue. It should be an American issue. We should be sitting here trying to say this is a way to encourage people to get their lives on track as opposed to saddle them for life with a sentence when they've already served their time. And so we should be looking at changing laws on the state level. And I think what you do is you first start with the legislatures where you largely have friends. You do it where you have people where you likely are to get it passed and signed into law. That's where you start, and then you begin to build from there. But that means that, frankly, look, 50% of black people live in the South. You look at the stats, that's where your problem is. We should be having the same intensity of marches that we saw in Sanford for Trayvon Martin, also on this issue when it comes to restoring rights. Let me say this last point for the next question. We've got to, again, get away from looking at this political stuff through the prism of if it's Obama or if it's a governor. Folks, those are moments we need to have movement. And the movement is not one issue. The movement deals with several different issues. Right now, George, people don't realize this is. Right now, civil rights groups are getting more help from Republican governors to confront sentencing reform than Democratic governors. My point is, this is not a Democratic conversation. This is not a Republican conversation. This is a moral question. And if there's anybody standing in our way blocking the path to get these things, even if they're Democrats, our job should be to take them out because the issue is more important than the party.
I love the way you frame that. On the call tonight with us, Roland, is a friend of yours, a friend of mine, Greg Hinton, the Chief Diversity Officer of the Democratic National Committee. He's on the call with us tonight. And he made a comment here. He sent it in, and I just want you to comment on it. What the president did was an executive order on diversity in all federal departments and the Black College executive order for African American studies. So the president has the power, even though the Republicans have vowed to block every piece of legislation. But through executive orders, he has gotten quite a bit done.
But remember, the way you can block an executive order is you can actually starve the funding.
Right.
That's how Congress does it. What they'll do is they'll say they will basically say we can cut the budgets. We'll limit how funds are used. And so again, and remember, first of all, the executive order for African Americans and education, that wasn't signed until July 2012. That wasn't signed until 3 months ago. So it's not like that's been in place for the last 3 years. But remember, the other issue, though, again, I say it again, with executive orders is, all right, let's say President Obama isn't reelected next week. Mitt Romney can rescind those executive orders. Now where are we left? We should never be at the mercy of, again, executive orders is a short-term solution. Legislation is the long-term solution. We've got to have a short game and a long game to achieve what we want to achieve.
Right. I just want to shift to a question. It's a little bit, in the past, but we have to think about it if our president is reelected again, and I believe in my heart of hearts, because he has been anointed, because there's no explanation that can explain his trajectory to the presidency and the ascension to the highest leadership position in the world, other than an anointment. And I think when God anoints something, He will give it the amount of time that the person needs to do the work that he wants done. So I think he will be elected simply because he has been anointed. But that's a whole other subject. But is it possible, though? Is it possible, Roland, that we will have political treason part 2? You see, that's what occurred the night of Obama's inauguration back in 2008 in Al Sharpton, when he interviewed Newt Gingrich about the private meeting that was conducted by 12 Republicans on inauguration night, in which they vowed to block every piece of legislation of the president's agenda, and they managed to do that. Will that kind of political treason occur again when he is elected?
I think you are going to see that if the House remains in control of Republicans, if the Senate remains in control of Democrats, I think you're going to see that. But here's still what has to happen. The folks who support the president have got to mobilize and organize and apply the kind of pressure to say, get this done now. See, you can't, again, though, we can't sit here and just watch these things play out, and all of a sudden you look up and you have 300,000 people showing up for a Glenn Beck rally on the nation's capital, and Tea Party folks showing up 1,000, 10,000, 20,000, and other folks sitting at home saying, man, it's a damn shame what they're doing to the president. At some point you've got to get into the game. And so we've got that. So we literally got to have folks who are organizing and mobilizing. You hear the phrase, or the president shouldn't be politicking 24/7, it's time to govern. Well, the people should be protesting, picketing, pushing, prodding 24/7 to make sure it happens. Washington understands force. Washington understands pressure. And I'm telling you, so for instance, I remember when President George H.W. Bush wasn't elected, and he chose to hold up the $3 billion or so in aid that was going to go to Israel because they continued to build settlements. He made that announcement. Congress woke up the following week, and they were greeted by 5,000 American Jewish individuals who hit every office on Capitol Hill. 435 House members, 100 U.S. senators. They dropped 5,000 on the Capitol, lobbying en masse. What I'm saying is that's one of the things that we frankly have to do. When you have, look, the Deltas are they have Delta days, I believe it's in January or February, okay? They're going to be doing that. You've got to have literally 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 Deltas on Capitol Hill in January, followed up by 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 AKAs and Zetas and Sigma Gamma Rhos and Alphas and Omegas and Kappas. Then you got to have the exact same thing when it comes to, okay, if you were fighting for HBCU funding, literally it's a matter of dropping those folks in. It's about organizing and mobilizing. And if somebody says we can't get to Washington, D.C., guess what? Every member of Congress, they have offices in their respective districts. So that means that you organize people in that district, and they go there. So if Sheila Jackson Lee is an African-American member of Congress from Houston, there are other members of Congress who are Republicans and Democrats who might be blocking something. That doesn't mean that you can't have people in her district and outside of her district mobilize and organize, and all of a sudden that person looks up and they've got 3,000 people camped outside their congressional office. The president has to have his supporters who are in the game. I'll use this analogy. It's very simple. The president is the general. You can't win no battles unless you got some troops. Mm-hmm. And the troops can't be at home saying it's a damn shame what they're doing to our president. You got to either get your behind on the battlefield or you're going to lose the war.
Right. You covered the
Roland,
go ahead.
you covered the AP story about the rise of racism in America, and you spoke about.
Yes.
I was reading where you talked about white fear, right, due to the changing demographics. And I know that you've been doing shows with T.D. Jakes around black manhood, and if you think about it, President Obama embodies all of the blessings and challenges that come with being a black male today. He's beautiful, he's black, he's brilliant, but he's been a lightning rod for all the pent-up racial animosity that exists in this country. I mean, black parents can now look at their kids and say, you can be anything, even president, but the flip side is that the level of racism that will be thrown at you will be brutal, right? He sort of embodies that paradox right now. What do you think the implications are for young black men, given your conversations around black manhood?
Look, I think, well, first of all, let's just be real clear. If young black men are choosing not to get educated, it don't even matter.
Right.
See, I mean, again, we can't have two different conversations. We can't say on one hand, oh my goodness, look at the president in terms of we can ascend to the highest level of the land. But yeah, if you don't show up to class, if you don't get your education and you flunk the hell out, and all of a sudden you devolve into a life of crime and then you become a felon, you can't run for office. Mm-hmm. See, and so I see what we have to understand is that yes, we are seeing a changing America. We are seeing America become we are moving to a majority minority country, and you have in many places you have whites who are fearful because yes, the fact is the world is changing. They have lived a life for years where when you said mainstream, that really meant white. And now all of a sudden, that's what it meant.
They've had privilege, right? They had privilege. Right. The privilege is gone away.
Right. Even if you were a broke white person, you still had white privilege. And so what's happening is this world is changing. What we have to do is we have to be armed for the future. I'm not saying armed meaning swords and shields and guns. I'm talking about armed in terms of being prepared for what's going on. Anybody who saw the documentary and Waiting for Superman has to understand that what is going on is we literally are creating, the next generation, 2/3 of them would not be able to do the jobs available in this country as a result of what's happening educationally today. Mm-hmm. And so what has to happen is we got to have Black America today having the same attitude that Black folks had in the late 1890s, in the early 1900s, 20, 30, 40, 50. And that's when you have Black people who said, Black parents who said, I might have a first or a second grade or a third grade education. But your behind's getting an education. What has happened is we have backed off of that fierce, no holds barred, I don't give a damn what you going through attitude when it comes to education. Now, I'm sure somebody on the call is saying, yeah, Roland, that's great, but all the hell people, they got to work 2 or 3 jobs and look at your background. Let me be clear. My mama didn't go to college. My dad didn't go to college. My mom was an insurance claim, worked for an insurance company. My dad worked for Amtrak. But that was an attitude that says, no, you're going to get an education. It's not even up for conversation. So we've got to say, look, let white folks have all the fear they want to. Our goal should be absolutely preparing, in essence, our army, if you will, for the battles of the future. And that cannot happen as long as we're having these again, we're trying to have, these systems. To me, there are 2 systems. There's that systemic racism we're dealing with, and there's that family community dynamic that we really don't want to confront. Like I keep saying, we can't talk about education and complain about teachers in kindergarten if we got many Black kids who are showing up to kindergarten not even knowing 250 words. We got to somehow confront the teacher from 0 to 4. That means our sisters, our brothers, our cousins, our nieces, our nephews, our uncles, our aunts, our mamas, and our daddies. We got to be prepared to have that kind of throwdown battle. And so while you have the political system and the business system, we got to deal with a family structure that also is not making this thing easier. It's making it more difficult.
Here's an interesting.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Veronica.
Go ahead.
Here's an interesting question. Someone popped up in my email box. Is the president black enough, and/or will he be blacker when he no longer has to worry about re-election?
First of all, I've heard that whole deal. First of all, the president is black. First of all, just remember, the president's half black, he's half white. Okay, let's just be clear. He self-identifies as an African American. Okay, I don't even know what black enough even means. Okay, the reality is the job that he has is a very difficult one because he has to walk a tightrope. Okay, he has to do that. But again, it does not serve the president well if we are silent. It doesn't serve the president's agenda if we are not mobilized and organized. And so we must stop looking to the president as the one who is going to lead a movement. It is not going to happen. He is a politician. A politician is going to make choices. They're going to make compromises. That is what is going to happen, and they will only disappoint you if you don't think so. What we need to be doing is, our whole attitude needs to be, how are we mobilized for November 7th? Now, let me explain what I mean by that. Mm-hmm. You have people right now who have been mobilized, making phone calls, sending out emails, driving people to the polls. They have been mobilized around an election. Okay, what happens on November 7th at 7 a.m. and November 8th and 9th and 10th? I have to keep going back. November 6th is the end of one process, and it is the beginning of another. If President Obama loses November 6th, black folks will be disappointed. There will be tears. There will be anger. But then we're going to have to shake that off and recognize that our agenda, our issues must still be addressed. So then what is going to be the game plan? If the president is reelected November 6th, our issues are still there. Our agenda is still there. We still must have a game plan to be able to go after it. And I say it again, our game plan cannot be a Democratic game plan or a Republican game plan. It has to be a game plan that is specific to black folks, and it might mean partnering with Democrats, Republicans, might mean partnering with whites, Hispanics, Asians, might mean partnering with issues, gays and lesbians. It might mean partnering with evangelicals. The agenda is what's most important in achieving it, and so we've got to be in that mindset on November 7th.
Mm-hmm. Question here. The black vote is important in this election, no question, and the importance of the Latino vote is increasingly important. Now, when it comes down to it, do we have an alternative to voting for President Obama? What's the alternative?
Let me be clear. Black people, you hear this nonsense all the time, and it comes from a lot of black Republicans. And look, I got lots of friends on both sides of the aisle. Mm-hmm. They say black folks aren't voting their interests. Yes, we are. Let me be real clear, and I've said this over and over again. White Republicans are largely afraid of black people. They are. They are afraid to communicate with black people. They are afraid to meet with black people. They're afraid to strategize with black people. You have mistrust on both sides. And I have been one of the folks who've been trying to break that down. I have had an open invitation for 4 years now, an open invitation for any member of the House Republican Conference and any member of the Senate Republican Conference to come on my TV One show to talk about issues. Not to be sandbagged, not to be not to walk into sniper fire, but to talk about issues. Now, follow me here, folks. A politician loves media attention. Mm-hmm. I'm offering, so even that backbencher, that one Republican who nobody calls, who don't even get any attention in their hometown newspaper, I am offering a national show to talk about issues. Nearly all of them have turned us down. Won't even respond to emails.
Why is that, Roland? Why is that? Why are they afraid?
Because one, in their mind, they are afraid that they're going to be called a racist. In their mind, they're going to be afraid that they're going to have to answer every bigoted comment or whatever that bigoted comment of the week was that came from some Republican somewhere in America, and we know it happens. And it's also because, frankly, they think, look, it's not going to matter to us, and I disagree. And I keep saying to the Republicans, until you stop being afraid of black people, you will never get our vote. George Voinovich, and again, let me give some history. George Voinovich was the mayor of Cleveland. Mm-hmm. He was the governor of Ohio. When he ran for the United States Senate, he got 40% of the black vote. Mm-hmm. Why? Because as mayor of Cleveland, he sat down with black folks. He sat down with interest groups. He sat down and said, what are your issues? What are your concerns? Where can we work together? Get a great relationship. 40%. Mike Huckabee,
I voted for him. Hey, I raised my hand. I voted for him in Cleveland. He was an awesome mayor. Awesome.
Mike Huckabee.
And I voted for him as a senator. Awesome.
There you go. Mike Huckabee got 48% of the black vote in Arkansas. Why? He wasn't afraid to talk to black people. Wasn't afraid to sit down with them. Wasn't afraid to say, what are the issues where we have common ground? Where do we agree? Where do we disagree? Where can we work together? That's what has to happen. You're seeing right now sentencing reform taking place in Ohio. Governor John Kasich started off, he had a lot of friction, a whole lot of animosity with black folks there, but they had to overcome that sort of stuff and say, where do we agree? That has to happen. And so when you say, what's an alternative for African Americans, when you got one party that totally ignores you, and then you have another party that frankly appeals to you, but I think should appeal to you more, then we got concerns. Let me say something right now that's very important, and I hope Greg Hinton is still listening to us as well, some of these Democrats. And this is extremely important, folks. If you look at the amount of money the Democratic Party has been spending, it has been woeful with African Americans. Now follow me here. I'm talking about elections. I'm talking about presidential elections. I'm talking about Democratic senatorial elections, Democrat congressional elections. And what am I speaking of with spending? I'm talking about vendors. I'm talking about black pollsters. I'm talking about black strategists. I'm talking about black political consultants. I'm talking about African Americans in terms of ad buyers. All those different things like that. And again, I've been highly critical of this in the past, so this is nothing new. And we've got lip service from the DCCC, from the DSCC, and others. And my point is this here: you can't talk about the value of black vote if you also are not ensuring that you are opening up those dollars. And people need to understand something. You're going to see in excess of $2 billion being spent on the election this year. $2 billion. You add in congressional races and senatorial races, the number could very well move up to $3 billion. So again, running ads in black newspapers and black radio and television is one thing. I'm also talking about how are you also empowering African Americans for those political jobs, because understand that's also an area where we are woefully underrepresented. And when you look at many of these campaigns, they're virtually all white. And I get young folks who volunteer as well. The bottom line is a lot of the senior staff, a lot of the people who are getting jobs as a result, they're spending $3, $4, $5, $6, $10 million. Very few of them are African Americans, and we need to have again dollars put there as well. But again, from a Republican Party standpoint, if you ignore black people, you will never be able to have an alternative. But there is proof of Republicans who have reached out. And let me say this here: Congressman Steve King of Iowa, he said some crazy, ridiculous stuff. He actually came on my show because I ran to him at the airport in D.C., said I'd love to come on. Pete Olson, congressman from Houston, came on my show to talk about energy. Congressman Tom Price from Georgia, he came on twice in the first and the second season. I've had Congressman Allen West. Now, Congressman Tim Scott of South Carolina, the brother, he's been avoided my show. I don't know why.
When are you going to get Herman Cain, man? I know you got a little war.
No. I have asked Herman Cain no less than 20 times, and Herman Cain has avoided me because Herman Cain doesn't want to answer real questions. But Ryan Priebus, head of the RNC, he told me in January in South Carolina he would love to come on the show. He's been avoiding me for 11 months, and I said, Ryan, Michael Steele came on. I said, man, look, if you want to try to get black folks, you want to keep avoiding the show? No. If you want to talk to black folks, you got to come through my show. But they are afraid to have to answer the tough questions because, frankly, in many cases, they have no answers.
They have no answers, right. We're down to the last two questions. You've been very generous with your time. Why should black folk help reelect President Obama?
I will speak to it this way. If you are an African American who's on this call, you have to make an individual decision as to what matters to you. What are your issues? What are your concerns? Let me put it to you this way. And look, I've been trying to get an interview with the president. We've had one back in 2010. We haven't for the last 22 months. But we've had senior cabinet officials and people along those lines on our show. Mitt Romney, to my knowledge, has done one interview with a national black media outlet. One. That was Black Enterprise.
Right.
That was it. Mitt Romney he has not talked to black radio, black television, black newspapers. He has absolutely avoided any kind of conversation. I believe the only interview on record is him talking to Black Enterprise. That's it. Now, let me tell everybody listening, I have communicated directly with Kevin Madden, his top communications guy. Mm-hmm. I've communicated directly with Tara Wall as well. Have asked on many occasions. They cannot say the request did not come in. When you look at the end of the day, the issues that are there, for the longest, Mitt Romney had no housing plan. That's a critical issue to African Americans. Mitt Romney talks about education. All he brings up are vouchers. I support vouchers, but Mitt Romney's plan has to be a lot deeper than that. I think an African American has to make the assessment, what are the issues that I care about deeply, and which candidate do I believe is going to go in there and fight for me and have my back. I simply believe, and I've always felt this, that if you ignore me during a campaign when you're trying to get my vote, you're going to ignore me when you're in the White House.
One last question, and this is from Anne-Marie Habershaw. She says, listen, we are not there yet, and I'm not one to sugarcoat things. Mitt Romney and the Republicans entered the last leg of this campaign with $45 million more in the bank than us. That's the problem, no matter where the polls stand. It's simply not an option in my mind to come this far just to have the other side buy this election at this very last minute. So we have the momentum in this race, but it's going to take every single one of us, and that means you and stepping up and taking ownership of this campaign. So they're saying donate now.
Well, here's the deal.
What do you think?
I get her point, but also I have to remind her, President Obama's team just blew away Senator John McCain's team in 2008 with money.
Right.
They raised some $700 million. I think they had a ton of money left over after the election. So, and I get her point. But this also, Democrats also, frankly, a lot of rich Democrats have been sitting on the sidelines, not wanting to give the super PACs as well. And now all of a sudden, when they realized that they were getting blown away in spending, a lot of them have been stepping up. So you're absolutely right. I literally just got a tweet to her point that said Team Romney is outspending Team Obama in the final week, $82.9 million to $44.6 million. But she needs to understand why. Romney has not constructed a real and serious ground game. They do not have as many offices in the critical battleground states as the Obama campaign. They are hoping to win this based upon what is happening, what is happening on the airwaves. That's their goal.
Okay, this has been awesome. You know, as I said, you have a political genius and savvy, but most importantly, a real feel for the game and a fearlessness. And you are a teacher. You really, really are. And most of us as students who are really just pleased to sit at the feet of a master of this game. And we really appreciate you for taking the time. Now, this is the time in the call we call shameless self-promotion. This is the shameless self-promotion time, Roland. So if there's something that you want us to go to the bookstore and buy? Is there someplace you're going to be? Is there something you want to promote that we can support you with?
Oh, well, all our books, you can go to RolandSMartin.com, and we have, obviously, the Obama political book that I have. Also, I published my wife's book dealing with living a fulfilled and balanced life. If you have issues there, you can certainly do that. In addition, we also put together a book of for married couples, a book of daily devotionals called Wedded Bliss for folks who need to keep their marriage tight and right. We got to keep black families intact. You can get all of that stuff again at you get all of that at RolandSMartin.com.
Right. Where can people see you every weekend?
We'll be obviously TV1's Washington Watch, 11 a.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Eastern on TV1. Our numbers are up 35%. We have had a phenomenal year. We want to keep that going, and also tell folks that as well, they want a show that speaks to our interests, our concerns, our way. Then they need to be watching Washington Watch, because at the end of the day, you're going to see more black people on Washington Watch on one Sunday than you're going to actually see on all those other shows combined.
That's right.
For a whole month.
That's exactly right. I don't miss it. If I have to miss it, I'm taping it. So I've got it on my my little machine that tapes your stuff every week, and so I watch it.
Cool.
Even if I can't watch it at that moment, I watch it sometime during the week. It's always informative, and it keeps me on top of what's going on in our community, certainly politically. Veronica, you have any shameless self-promotion time, anything you want to promote?
Oh, no, not me at this time. This was such a great conversation. It's such a timely conversation. Thank you so much.
And Julius
Cartwright, bringing the wisdom.
Julius?
Yeah, I just wanted to first and foremost say to Roland Martin, I think he's an incredible genius in terms of the conversation. It was very enriching and enlightening and empowering. I'm sure all of our members that are on the call, as well as friends of George, really enjoyed the conversation. I know I did, and I took a lot of notes, so I'm pleased with that. Yeah, I actually have a couple of shameless plugs. First and foremost, we are in the process of having our Solutions Forum at the State of Housing Black America, which will be held at Texas Southern University on November 16th, and then we're going to begin to roll out one of our solution models. And we'd like to have Roland with us in San Diego in 2013 in February. So we're going to talk a little bit more with you about that.
At the national conference.
Yeah, our national winter conference in
Right.
San Diego, California in February. So we're going to work to try to get on this get his calendar together and get him
Great.
so he can come and
the
address
next
our
Power Talk and Friends of George call will be next month with Yala Van Zandt, and we will send you more information about that at a later date. I'm taking a small group of people to Africa, to Ghana, on a Black History Month Ghanaian VIP sojourn with myself and Dr. David Whitaker, and you're going to go to the slave castles. It's going to be a trip like none other. If you're interested in going to Africa, Ghana with the FraserNet group, please just email me, gfraser@frasernet.com, gfraser@frasernet.com, and I will send you the information on our Africa trip to Ghana. Also, don't forget the Power Networking Conference next year. Put it on your calendar. Save the date, June 27th through 29th, 2013. The title of the conference is Cash Noir, N-O-I-R, it's black. Leveraging our money, talent, and technology to transform our businesses and community. So you can go right to powernetworkingconference.com and get more information about the Power Networking Conference next June. And I'm going to beg one more time for Roland to come to that conference, to be a part of that conference. But we'll do that offline, Roland. And then finally, I have a new book out called Who Would Have Thunk It? It's a children's book about 3 foster kids growing up on the streets of Brooklyn, New York, teaching other children that it takes teamwork to make the dream work. It's sort of a networking primer for tweens, 7 to 12 years old. Who would have thunk it? If you're interested in purchasing the book, it's a great little book. It's really an autobiographical fiction. It's the story of my life and my sister and my brother, Emma, George, and Joseph. And it's a great little story. It's a great read for adults and certainly a great read for young young children to read about the power and importance of relationships and teamwork, making the dream work through through the eyes of foster children. And by the way, November 1st starts National Foster Care Month and National Adoption Month. There are 400,000 children in foster care. The overwhelming majority of those children are black and brown. So it might be a great little gift to purchase and give away to a foster kid as well. And finally, I again just want to thank Roland Martin for your, the generousness of the time that you spent with us.
Appreciate it.
You're just awesome, and we love you. Keep doing God's work. Keep doing what you are so good at doing, and I don't know what we would do without you. So
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Be back at you. All righty.
Take care.
Everybody, next month you'll get more information. Iyanla Van Zant, we will, of course, send this recording to anybody that wants it. Actually, we'll send it to everybody in our networks, and you can listen to it and share it with other people. You have a good evening. Veronica, thank you so much. And Julius, thank you so much. Great questions, and it was just a great conversation with a great person. Appreciate you all.
Thank you, George.
All righty.
Take care. Good night, everybody.
Good night.